That's wonderful. Well, welcome, Dr. Wood Menzies. It's such a pleasure to have you present at the Center for Black Studies Research today. I am Dr. Sharon Tediga, the director for the Center for Black Studies Research, and we have Rosa Pinter, who's the administrative business officer at the center. And I like to just start out to figure out, how's your day going?
Oh, it's going great. I'm super happy to be here, and it's sunshiny out here in Santa Barbara. And I'm just feeling really wonderful to be able to still give this talk today.
Well, that's awesome. And I take everybody that's out there in the virtual land, they're doing okay as well.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
And you guys, there are tools on the site, if you don't mind. Please use your tools if you can. I think we have the chat session, if you can use that. And could you let us know how you would like to have the questions handled, Dr. Wood Menzies?
I'm happy to take questions by voice afterwards. If folks want to raise their hands, you have a hand raise button. So you are welcome to raise your hand if you have a question as I'm speaking. You're also welcome to type your thoughts into the chat. And once we're done, I can look at those as well. I know sometimes as you're speaking, there's a hot thought, so you're welcome to put it in the chat also.
Okay, so Rosa, if you don't mind monitoring that and helping to facilitate when people raise their hand, and then that way you can call on individuals if they have questions.
Okay.
Dr. Funlayo Wood Menzies is currently a postdoc fellow in the Center for Black Studies Research at the University of California, Santa Barbara. She earned a PhD from Harvard University and an MA in history from the City College of New York. An initiative of Obatala and Inyanifa, she is delighted to contribute her voice as a scholar, practitioner, and is dedicated to combining scholarship with social praxis. A native of New York City, Dr. Wood Menzies has conducted research in Nigeria, Ghana, Cuba, Trinidad, Peru, and the United States. Her research on Ifa Orisa and other African and diasporic traditions centers epistemology, gender and sexuality, healings, and intersections between religion, science, and technology. She serves as a managing editor of the Africana Studies Review, a member of the board of the Journal of Interreligious Studies, and her work has been published in academic and popular venues, including the Journal of Africana Religions, Cross Currents, and Medium. Committed to public scholarship, Inya Dr. Funlayo consistently seeks to share her knowledge beyond the ivory tower. She lectures regularly and was featured in the PBS documentary, Sacred Journeys, Osun Osogbo, 2014, and an episode of National Geographic's The Story of God with Morgan Freeman in 2017. She is the founding director of the African and Diasporic Religious Studies Association and Ese Ari and Ifa Orisa Temple and Community University. Welcome and thank you for your willingness again to present.
Asheo, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Sharon, just for all of your support since I've been at the center. Thank you, Rosa, for your support with the technology and all the other things that you have helped with since I've been there. We're just really delighted today. So I want to start off with, of course, greeting everybody and saying Ekuroleo. That means greetings for the late afternoon and early evening in Yoruba. And when I say that, you respond simply by saying, oh, hey, I see Falami. She said, oh. So I won't know if you said it, but I'm going to know if you said it. So I'm going to say Ekurole, and you say, oh, yes, I see those O's popping up. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So if you ever ask a person who is Yoruba what the O means, they will say it's to make you smile. And so I hope that many of you are smiling right now as we go into our time together. So as I was preparing to come before you and considering, and I'm gonna just share my presentation here, I was considering how I was going to greet you and all of that. And of course, Yoruba epistemology came to mind because We are greeting each other from different places right now. So I'm in California where it is 4:30 p.m. Some of you are on the East Coast where it is 7:30 p.m. Some of you are in Chicago, it's 6:30, Denver where it's 5:30. And so we would call those times afternoon and evening, but there's no one word that we would use to refer to all of them. So Yoruba resolves that problem for us with the term irole, late afternoon. This is the time when the sun has gone past its apex and is headed towards setting, but has not quite set yet. This is the only word that fits both the East and the West and all points in between at this moment. So I am grateful for Yoruba and its epistemology. And this very simple demonstration illustrates the importance of what I'm going to discuss today, which is expanding our ways of knowing using Africana epistemologies. And we start with language and communication, as these are the central pillars of coming to know and of being able to communicate what we know. So simply learning that one new word in an African language, irole, as you all just did, has shifted your idea of time, some of you. So imagine how much learning not only new words, but also new gestures, sounds, and combinations of gestures and sounds can shift within a person. Quite a lot. It is to this epistemological position, seeing things in new ways, which are really old ways, that I dedicate my scholarship. I thank you all for being here with me. And once again, I thank you, Sharon, and the Center for Black Studies, as you have helped me transition my dissertation into the manuscript from which the ideas in this talk are drawn. So we have a special guest with us today who is going to help me talk about all of this epistemological stuff. I don't know if you knew that we would have a guest, but she is my co-host of sorts. She is a master communicator known by many names, and my forthcoming book is all about her. She is Obi Abata, the kola nut. Kola acuminata scientifically, Iya Obi, the four-lobed kola nut. And I will show you this in person because not only do you have your picture on the screen, but I also have one here live for you to see. If you have heard me speak from any portion of my book before, you have met Obi, but if not, you'll become more intimately acquainted with her as the talk continues. For now, I'll note that it is her, the kola nut, that the word cola, as in Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola, come from, as it was the kola nut that was the original source of caffeine for these medicinal elixirs turned party drinks. More about that in the book. So, as I noted, despite the reason, it's actually quite serendipitous that we are here together online and that I'm here in my shrine room / office giving this talk, because the most important thing about the kola nut and what I will be highlighting today is her role as an intermediary translator between the divinities, which the Yoruba call Orisha, and human beings. According to the Yoruba, wisdom is encoded in the sacred Odus of Ifa, and they say that it is Obi Nibe Iku, Obi Nibe Arun, Obi Nibe Nkankan Buruku Laye. It is the kola nut that is uniquely a way to push away death, sickness, and all negativity of life. A part of the way she does this is by communicating the wishes of the deities to human beings so that we are able to make the necessary appeasements for Ire Owo, Ire Omo, Ire Aiku, the blessings of wealth, children, and long life. Now, let's examine together how this works in action. Oreye, yeo, o mio, o tao, ideo, agbao, oreye, yeo. Thus begins my prayer conversation with the Orisha Oshun, the Yoruba deity most often cited as the goddess of love, but who also very importantly embodies civilization and connections between people, as it is on the banks of her home, the river, where most all societies began. Kneeling before my home shrine, I touch my forehead to the floor in supplication to all of the deities present. As today is Oshun's worship day, I remove the bowl holding her implements from the shrine, place it on a mat on the floor, knock 3 times on the lid, and I open it. As I continue to pray, I take one kola nut, known in Yoruba as obi, from the bag on my shrine and place it into a small bowl of water to bathe it, as is customary before performing divination. Removing it from the water, I touch the obi to my head, chest, and to the implements of Oshun, and then place it on the floor before her. I touch the floor with the fingers of my right hand and then slap the fist of my left hand with my open palm 3 times as I call out to the earth. Ile mopeo, ile mopeo, ile mopeo. Earth, I call out to you. I repeat the gesture, this time touching the implements of Oshun. Oshun mopeo, Oshun mopeo, Oshun mopeo. Oshun, I call out to you. Following this, I pick up the obi and separate it into its 4 natural segments, holding 2 segments in my left hand and 2 in my right. I present each hand in turn to Oshun and then beseech her, Iya Oshun, Iya mi ba. Oshun, my mother, please accept. And I cast the pieces to the floor. 3 segments land facing up, 1 down. This signature is called Iwa. I snap my fingers 3 times and then pick the pieces up again. Iya, is your message for me today a reminder that it is my good character that brings my blessings? I cast the pieces again and they land in the same configuration. The answer is no, that is not the message. I pick the pieces up. Iya, do you have a message of ire or blessing for me today? I cast. No. I pick the pieces up again. Iya, do you have a message of ayewo or warning for me today? I cast. No. I stop and think, well, what else could she want or need or want to say? I suggest a few things, casting after each one, and again, she says no. What is it that she wants? I spend a few moments watching her, looking at her implements closely, and then it hits me. Ah, you want me to take you out of this plastic bowl, is that it? I cast. 2 pieces up, 2 down. Oyan, perfect, balanced, absolute, yes. Ah, I had recently moved, and during the process, I stored Oshun's implements in a covered Tupperware bowl for easy transport. Clearly, she had grown tired of being so housed, and if you know Oshun, you understand that. I explained to her that I don't have the fancy vessel I normally keep her in, but that I'll put her in a glass bowl for the time being. And then I rise to do so, carrying the plastic bowl containing her implements along with me into the kitchen. After carefully cleaning and shining all of her implements and transferring them to a lidded clear glass bowl, I return to the shrine area, place her on the floor, kneel down again, and pick up the segments of obi. Holding them in my hands, I ask, Iya, now that I've moved you and with the offerings of this obi, honey, spirits, and palm oil I'm about to give you, do you accept? Is all well? I cast. The pieces fall slowly and land in the ejife position, 2 up and 2 down. Yes, all is well. I touch my forehead to the floor and say, Adupe, I give thanks. Were it not a prohibition for me, I would have taken a bite of each of the segments of the Obi to share in Oshun's offering with her, as is customary. But since eating Obi is my taboo, I place the 4 segments, unbitten, into the bowl with her implements. Taking a swig from a small bottle of gin, I use my mouth to spray it onto the implements in the bowl. I pour a few drops of honey, followed by a small dousing of palm oil, and then close the lid on the bowl and place it on the shelf on the shrine. I touch my head to the floor once more before rising. Thus, the conversation ends. Conversations like these take place between practitioners of Ifa Orisha religion and their deities known as Orisha on a daily basis. Divination using the kola nut, known in Yoruba language as Obi, is the conduit through which much of this communication takes place. Here is just a bit of information about the plant, and I have a whole chapter devoted to Obi's place in the history of plant medicine in the book, along with plants and fungi like cannabis, psilocybin mushrooms, and ayahuasca, which is also, like the 4-lobed Obi, interestingly called the mother, la madre. And 4-lobed Obi, which we're discussing today, is called Iya Obi or Mother Obi. So there is a trend and of these teacher plants being called the mother, which of course makes sense because mother is our first teacher. We see here that the kola nut is not actually a nut, but the seed of the kola tree. The 4-lobed Obi, which we're discussing today, is scientifically called Kola acuminata, while the 2-lobed Obi, called Banja or Guro in Yoruba, is called Kola nitida scientifically. And the discerning eye will note that my picture of the Iwa position of the Obi a few slides ago was actually 2 of the 2-lobed kola and not a 4-lobed. The kola nut contains caffeine and is where the term kola originates, as I noted. And kola nut in Ifa Orisha tradition is used as an energy tonic, it is used as a divination tool, and it is also used as a purification tool, as well, of course, as a conduit of communication, which is central to our discussion today. So unlike some faith traditions where communication with the divine may be whispered or even simply thought to oneself with no verbal utterance, conversing with the Orisha requires engagement of a practitioner's whole self. Prayers must be spoken aloud. Eyes must remain open to see the signs. Fingers must snap. Hands must grasp, throw, and pour. Mouths must chew, spit, and utter affirmations. Ears must hear those affirmations. Bells must ring. Shekeres must shake. Knees and backs must bend. Foreheads must touch the floor. Thus, these conversations are at once visual, oral with the mouth, aural with the ear, and kinesthetic. All of these faculties must be engaged in order for communication to take place. Despite the frequency with which these full body, holistically embodied conversations occur, they are arguably the least studied aspect of Orisha devotion. Though the tradition has been studied extensively since the end of the 19th century, first by missionaries, later by priests, and later still by scholars of religion, and even more recently, scholar practitioners such as myself, Obi divination and the epistemologies it embodies have been severely under-theorized. I argue that this is because, unlike the oft-studied Ifa divination system, whose knowledge has often been reduced to its oral literature or orature, giving it a closer similarity with the Abrahamic book face and therefore more validity to outsiders as a cogent system, Obi lacks the type of scriptocentric knowledge base that might be likened to the Bible or Quran, instead occupying a decidedly more embodied space. Robin Bernstein remarks on the difficulty some scholars, trained as they are in evaluating written sources, may have with capturing and analyzing this type of lived behavior, noting that it may seem too ephemeral to capture and therefore go unappreciated. This is certainly the case with Ifa Orisha, within which, even insofar as behaviors have been studied, they have typically been grand behaviors around festivals or other large public events rather than what Elizabeth Perez, who is with us today, hello, calls micro practices like Obi divination. But these micro practices are of the utmost importance because Perez argues, and I agree, that they are the crux of African and diasporic religions as they, quote, develop the faculties, sentiments, and expertise indispensable for their viability and spread. Another reason for the understudy of Obi may be that whereas Ifa is male-dominated and historically connected with Yoruba monarchy, the use of Obi is more egalitarian. Every initiate of any Orisha, whether female or male, must use Obi. And depending on one's initiation and level of practice, she or he may ostensibly use it every day. Obi may therefore be one of those objects that is hidden in plain sight, so commonly used as to go unnoticed as the site of investigation. That is, until now. My forthcoming book project, Obi, Death, Divination, and the Divine Feminine, addresses this gap in the literature by examining the various conceptions and uses of Obi, including its role as the most frequently used divination medium in Ifa Orisha practice. One of my primary concerns in the work is addressing what I see as the erroneous tendency to refer to Ifa Orisha religion and the Yoruba culture from within which it arises as oral, and to assert that cultural and religious knowledge, like Obi divination, has been passed, quote, orally from generation to generation. Positing Ifa Orisha and other African religions in this way omits not one, not two, but three vital components, which are crucial to understanding the holistically embodied epistemology that characterizes Ifa Orisha. Excuse me. And other African religions. I refer to this intersection between the seen, the spoken, the heard, and the embodied as the visual, oral, aural kinesthetic complex, or VOC. And I refer to cultures and religions with this orientation, of which Ifa Orisha is one, as being VOC oriented. Before we can move into VOC, however, we have to understand two interrelated components of African epistemology: witnessing and call and response. One of the most celebrated Yoruba divinities, Orunmila, sometimes called by the name of his associated divination system, Ifa, is called Eleri Ipin, the witness to destiny. This is because it is thought that Orunmila was present when each human being, each object, each animal selected their destiny from heaven. And it is because he was present that Olodumare, the grand creator, called Orunmila to be present, that he is called Eleri Ipin, the one who witnessed. In Yoruba epistemology, it is thought that nothing actually happened unless there is a witness to say that they saw it. And so witnessing is a very, very important aspect of Yoruba epistemology, Africana epistemologies more often, and speaks a lot to our community orientation towards the production and sharing of knowledge. As well, this idea of witnessing is one of the reasons for the most celebrated African epistemological orientation, the call and the response. By responding to the call, as Kokava Zauditu Selassie would say, you are confirming that you have borne witness to the call and all that is happening. So if I were to ask you to wiggle your fingers right now, right, or press the number 1 or do anything to indicate that you heard me, you would be responding to my call. And so understanding this, it is clear why orality alone would never suffice when we're talking about Ifa Orisha or any other Africana epistemology. The major premise of speaking of voc orientation is simply that that which is rendered orally is meant to be received orally. That which is rendered kinesthetically is meant to be received visually. And so the process of speech and recitation is accompanied in Yoruba culture and language with movements of the body that are also pregnant with meaning. It is clear that speaking of the oral alone, again, does not suffice because these 4 modes work in tandem and must be studied as a unit in order to gain the fullest understanding, not only of any given utterance, but also of Ifa Orisha epistemology as a whole. It is my aim to continue to define and refine this complex such that it serves as a useful hermeneutic, not only for examining Ifa Orisha, but also other similar traditions. Diane Diakite has said, Stuart, has said that when one describes a thing as post something or not something, it is clear that they don't know what that thing actually is. Describing a person or thing as not something or non-something indicates a lack of understanding or a lack of desire to recognize what that thing is in its essence on its own without an outside reference point. African and diasporic societies have typically occupied these post and non spaces, being so frequently referenced as both non-literate and post-colonial that it becomes clear that neither African means of language codification and transmission, nor their means of political organization is adequately understood or respected. This is one reason why it's important for scholars of African and diasporic religions, and really all religions outside of Christianity, which dominates the religious studies field and around which most theories have arisen, to continue to theorize and to construct what Jacob Olupona refers to as indigenous hermeneutics that draw from our traditions rather than seeking to force our ideas into frames where they don't fit. My positing of the voc complex is my contribution to this endeavor. This is particularly significant because understanding this aspect of African epistemology goes beyond religion and speaks to how we encode and transmit our knowledge. It also helps to explain why, for example, despite the long-standing presence of Western education in Yoruba land, until very recently, Ifa Orisha practitioners have resisted reducing certain types of knowledge to writing. It isn't because it couldn't be written, but because even more than referring to it as oral, writing it down truly does reduce it. The knowledge is more than words on a page, but includes the hearing of the utterance, the sacred energy or ashe of the speaker, and the performance of the corresponding motions that at once embody the energy of the words and also act, importantly, as mnemonic devices that facilitate learning across generations and ages. When, for example, a child or a new practitioner learns the signature of Obi, they learn corresponding motions for each signature, and these motions serve multiple functions. First, they act as a mnemonic, a reminder of the signature, even if the practitioner doesn't remember or is unable to speak the words associated with it. And importantly, again, to this pre-verbal point, it serves as a means of transmitting religious knowledge to children who are so young as to be pre-verbal. Indeed, it isn't uncommon to see very young pre-verbal children repeating the motions associated with the Obi signature and other aspects of Ifa Orisha knowledge when they are present at ceremonies and rites. Interestingly, these very same principles as we know, like I said, new ways, which are actually old ways, these very same principles are now being used in very expensive occupational therapy sessions that use interactive metronomic therapy for children in the West who have been diagnosed with certain types of learning disabilities. So we understand that these maneuvers and this way of connecting motion with speech and therefore helping a child or a learner to embody knowledge more deeply starts with us. It did not start with metronomic therapy at $500 an hour. So, as we heard in my vignette, when the signature known as Iwa, character, appears, the fingers of both hands are snapped 3 times, usually up near the head, coming from back to front. This motion awakens the Ori, the inner self, and brings the self into awareness. It is a reminder that one's character is the most important. As within the ethics of Ifa or Risha, it is good character that each of us should seek before we seek anything else. When a person demonstrates good character, all else falls into place, as ostensibly they would not lie, steal, cheat, or engage in any activities considered immoral according to Ifa or Risha ethics, if they are people of good character, also known in Yoruba as Omoluabi. When the signature known as Yan Ejife falls, this is the most perfect balanced yes, as I mentioned. And this is when we celebrate, we say yes, we call out to whichever Orisha we are having our conversation with using the Obi. And the reason for that, and we touch our heads down to the ground. Importantly, that's the one major gesture. There are only a few divinities that we would not do this with, but with most we kneel down and we touch our heads down to the ground. And so this kinesthetic motion embodies humility, has us remember that it is both ire ati ayewo, it is loss and gain. Ire ati ibi lada ile aye, it is loss and it is gain that make the world. And so we give thanks by putting the head down to the ground, reminding ourselves of our humility, and also reminding ourselves of the fact that things could change tomorrow. Today, the light and the dark are balanced, but even 5 minutes from now, that may not be the case. And so again, this is a kinesthetic motion meant to be received visually, so that as well, even if we're at a community event and a person is not close enough to see what the signature of Obi was that fell, if everyone is kneeling down to touch their heads, they know that it must have been Oyan. If everyone is snapping their fingers, they know it must have been Iwa. So these are also methods of facilitating community learning and communal learning, which is very, very crucial in Africana epistemologies. Okan, 1 up and 3 down. When this signature appears, we touch our chest and we touch the ground 3 times. And we ask the Orisha if what they're trying to communicate is that we should fokambale, put our hearts down to the ground, meaning not to worry about any circumstance that may be going on. Now, interestingly, Okan means the heart. Okana, which this signature is more often called in the diaspora, means a problem. Both are correct in the sense that when we have a problem, it often occupies our heart space, right? And we're worried about it. And so when this Okan falls, often it is that there is a concern on the devotee's heart that they would like, that the divinity is telling them to not worry about. And so once again, this gesture of touching the heart and touching the ground not only acts as a mnemonic, but also embodies the idea of placing our hearts down. It connects the ashe of the chest to the ashe of the earth. Ileogeria Foko Yere, who herself is seen as a divinity, another mother on whose back all humanity rides, and who is also seen, of course, as a healer, as a home, and as everything to us. And so this signature of Okan tells us that we should not worry, and that we should know that the divinities have handled all of what needs to be handled. When we see this signature, alafia, again, in this kinesthetic conversation, we make this gesture of bringing in all of the light and all of the goodness and bathing ourselves with it. This, again, is a motion that is intended to embody bringing in all of the good energy and all of the light that is being shown here. The other reason why we do this is to protect ourselves, because sometimes, just as darkness precludes us from seeing too much light, right? When you look directly into the sun, too much light can also prevent us from seeing, which is why the 2 up and 2 down of Yan is considered the perfect reading, although alafia is good, right? But we know that alafia can be almost a blinding light at moments, but it does also represent peace and the light of Obatala, who is the divinity that's represented by white cloth. So again, one of the reasons that I'm explaining all of these various aspects is for us, I'm teaching a new language right now, right? For us to understand the depth of language that goes beyond words, that goes beyond the oral, where we are expanding our understanding of everything that we see. We understand this, of course, because we know that nonverbal communication is 90% of our communication, right? Which is why we love these forums where we can see each other as opposed to just hearing each other, because you can see a face, you can see a gesture, and others can see that too, even if they're not close enough to hear. And so that's why that whole, fix your face, right? Because whatever we're thinking on the inside, if you're showing it on the outside, somebody can see that. In Africana epistemologies, we want to be seen. We want to bear witness to one another. We want to use each and every one of our faculties in all of these communication processes. And once again, they facilitate learning. One of the important things about this, and as Peter Berger talked about in his book, The Sacred Canopy, one of the things that religious education has to do in order to be effective is to work across the lifespan, right? This is why those of us who are familiar with Christianity, we have Sunday school from the time before you're able to read. You start off with coloring the pictures of Jesus. Then when you can read, you read the Bible verses. Then when you can analyze, you analyze them. Then when you graduate to these different levels. Similarly, with Africana epistemologies, Yoruba epistemology in particular, we are able to graduate across the lifespan first, starting not with words, right? Because we move before we talk. So we start off with and, right? We start there. And so through the elucidation of this sacred language, of this Vok complex, I, again, am seeking to provide a new hermeneutic through which those of us who study Africana religions are able to analyze in a new framework with which to explain some of what we see in the course of our work as we are out observing practitioners or observing ourselves, as the case may be in autoethnography. This, I will say as well, pushes the boundaries a little bit of the performance theory, which has been put forth in Africana religions, which has been championed by several scholars, including Velma Love in her book, Divining the Self. And so this actually goes along with performance theory, because of course, if we are performing an act, or when we think of the word performance, it is meant to be received. If we're performing a song, a gesture, it is meant to be seen, heard, etc. But one of the concerns with going and actually breaking it down in this way is to further be able to explain even more deeply and clearly what is happening in each of these utterances of performance. And finally, I end with the last signature of the Obi, which is all four down, which we call Ishegun. And when Ishegun shows itself, we knock 3 times on the ground, and we actually take a rock and we break the pieces of the Obi. Ishegun means victory. And it is a perfect signature for us to close out with, because in Yoruba, they also associate each day of the week with a different position. And Tuesday, today, is Ojo Ishegun, the day of victory. So as I conclude and prepare to enter what I know will be a rich discussion with you, I pray and wish victory for all of us as we continue to face this challenge. Victory, Ishegun, reminds us that even when darkness is showing, and this is considered all dark showing, all the backs of the obi, even at the darkest, it is always darkest before the dawn. It always has to go all the way down before it can spring back up. And that is also a part of our Africana epistemology, keeping ourselves hopeful even in the face of challenge, tragedy, struggle, keeping ourselves hopeful and knowing that even when all the chips are down, we can break that obi and throw another one and see it all turn up and turn to alafia. So may we all have peace. May we all have alafia. Thank you.
Rosa, you're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry.
You're good now.
Yes, okay. I see one question. Should I read it to you or?
Sure, yes. And I also see one person with their hand up, Michelle, so we will come to you shortly. Yeah. Yes, please, I would love to hear the question.
Is the kola nut and the implements always referred to in the feminine?
Thank you for asking that. So the kola nut, yes, which here, I will show you in person, live and direct. So this is the four-lobed kola nut. And this is actually the seed, as I mentioned. So the plant would begin to grow out from here, and this becomes a whole tree. So this four-lobed kola nut, yes, is always referenced in the feminine. She is called Iya Obi, the mother Obi, and is always referenced as being feminine. And so that's one of the reasons that the divine feminine and the idea of mother figures very prominently in my book, thinking about how not only Obi, but as I mentioned, also ayahuasca and other plants who are teachers, who are considered to be spiritual teachers, are referred to in the feminine and are referred to as the mother. So thank you for that question. And as I mentioned as well, you know, mother is the first teacher, right? It just in terms of in life. And so it makes sense that these amazing teachers would be referred to in that way as the mother.
Thank you.
Oh, I see a whole lot of Black Studies students in here. Hey, shout outs. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you to those who invited their classes. I love that. I love to have students here, and you're all welcome. I see the thank yous. You're very, very welcome. Oh, Michelle put her hand down. She got shy. The name of the book is called, it's forthcoming. It is called Obi, Death, Divination, and the Divine Feminine. I will type that in here, and it will be out prayerfully next year. I am just about done with the manuscript. This whole connection to the history of plant medicine is a whole new chapter that was not in my dissertation. As I got deeper into working with certain indigenous communities and seeing, first of all, again, how many times various teacher plants are referred to as the mother or in this feminine way, and also learning about, of course, the persecution of women in Europe and in Africa across the globe as so-called witches. This witch persecution included the persecution of plants. And a lot of the language and the verbiage around persecuting women was around their use of plants. And so a woman, for example, under the edicts that were carried out during the witch trials, some of the language there was, if a woman uses herbs to harm or heal, right? It didn't matter what she was using them for, but if a woman had plant knowledge at all and used plants to do anything, she was possibly going to be accused of being a witch. And so plants have such a huge, huge connection to not only Africana epistemologies, but also to this history of the persecution of Africana religions, of indigenous religions more broadly, and of women in the religious space, as well as more broadly in the world. So thank you for that question.
I see more questions. There's one from Natalie Lopez. Have you written any other books?
I have not. This is going to be my first academic book, and I am super excited for it. It's going to be the first full-length scholarly treatment of the kola nut, so I'm very excited about that as well. And so I'll look forward to sharing that with you. I have written some articles, and you can get to those at my website, which I'm putting into the chat, which is just funlayophd.com. I have some articles, journal articles that you are able to download from there if you'd like to hear more from me. And thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you. Here's one more. Do you have any personal anecdotes of what the Obi has taught you that you would be willing to share?
So many, right? How do I choose one? But really, actually, that conversation that I shared at the beginning of the presentation was so poignant, and it touched on so many things. You know, one of my, again, primary orientations as I do my work, as I write this book, and as I work in general, is to really bring us out of this realm of thinking of Africana religions as just being something important in a spiritual sense. The idea of religion is a foreign concept, really, in Africana epistemologies, right? Everything is engaged. The spirit is a part of our learning, is a part of our family community, is a part of our sociology. It's all tied together. And so when we start to part and parcel things out and put one thing over here and one thing over there, that's when we miss the richness. And so my concern is really to bring all of these things back together and think about how divination inspires us, as Dr. Love spoke about in her book, to think about ourselves, right? People, when we talk about divination, we often think of it as fortune telling or as being told something from on high. But a lot of the concern of what readings and divination are actually intended to do are to get us to consider our own actions and to get us to think about the things that we're doing and how we can do them better. And so in that conversation with Oshun, you know, I didn't draw it out to as many times as I actually threw the Obi before I figured out what she wanted. But trust me, I threw about 10, 15 times, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is it? Like, I was offering her everything in the house, and she's like, nope, 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 nope. And finally I said, oh, this plastic bowl, like, duh, that should have been the first thing, because as I mentioned, you know, Oshun, she is known for the energy of refinement, right? We often talk about love, but really her energy is the energy of refinement, of finery, and of connection. And of course, all of the Orisha are about being natural, right? So she was like, I was okay with this plastic bowl while we were moving, but we're here now, so I need to be in something else. So, but the main point about that, and what has come up all over and over as I've interviewed people, is just this idea of how reading with the Obi every day and having these conversations with the spirits on a daily basis, as with any relationship, right, keeps as Elizabeth Perez said in her book, these are the things that keep the religion going. It's not the grand initiations, it's not the grand festivals that happen 2-3 times a year. It's these things that we, generally women, are doing on a daily basis that keep our religions, our cultures, our epistemologies functioning, running, and developing. And so this book is really, and this study of Obi is really a celebration and a study of women's knowledge, and of women as the keepers of knowledge. Women as the keepers of knowledge. Ooh, I'm about to start, but there's another female entity called Odu, who is the entity who is connected to the divinity I mentioned earlier called Orunmila. And all of the literature and the things that are talked, that we hear about Ifa speak about it as this very male dominated system, which it is. But one of the reasons for that is that women are thought to be more connected to fluid systems like Obi. Ifa is very static in the sense that one is meant to memorize certain pieces of information, sort of like a computer system. You memorize it, and then based on a particular signature, you pull up a verse from your memory to recite, right? It's very mechanical. And this is one of the reasons that it has traditionally been male, because in Yoruba epistemology, men aren't thought to have the same fluid, intuitive connection with Olodumare that women have, right? And so in the process of getting initiated into that particular priesthood, men receive what is called Odu, right? And women who can also be initiated into that priesthood, they don't receive it. So the common verbiage around why women don't receive it is that they're not allowed to. But the truth of the matter is that Odu is an embodiment of the womb. And the men have to receive it because the womb is seen as the seat of all creation, knowledge, and everything that is possible on earth, which is why the mother occupies such an important position. So when men go through these initiations, they are receiving a womb, which we already have. So we don't need to receive it. So it's not about not being allowed. And this is one of the things that a lot of these conversations around the differences in men's and women's practice are often couched this way, in terms of women are not allowed to do this or women are not allowed to do that. And so part of my work as well has been excavating the truth of these ideas and where they come from. The other one that I'll mention before I conclude this point is that of the drum, Ayan, who is also a female energy. So traditionally, women did not play the types of drums that you would sit on your lap to play. The reason for that is that Ayan, being a female entity, was to be played by the male. In Yoruba epistemology, a lot of the orientations mimic natural orientations. So if we're talking about creation, we're talking about sexual interaction. So the interaction between the drum and the male drummer is a mimicry of sexual interaction that creates an energy in the way that a male and female coming together create a certain energy. This is one of that. It's not that women weren't allowed, right? Again, it's because of the type of energy that we're seeking to create. So it's really important for me as I study this and as I go through this to really bring out these points and for us to understand the real reasons behind these differences in gendered practice, right? That it's not that women aren't allowed to do things, but that our practice is different. And furthermore, understanding all of this really brings our knowledge systems to the fore, because there are rhymes and reasons. Simply saying you're not allowed to, that tells us nothing. But when we now dig into the rhyme and the reason, that's where we're getting to that epistemological core. That's where we're getting to the real gold and the meat of our orientations of knowledge, production, and keeping and sharing. So thank you for that question.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we have about 4 more minutes. Should I read another question here?
Yes, actually, I see one that I would like to answer.
Okay.
Somebody asked, because this is a simple one, it says, which divinities do not get greeted by touching the ground? Does 5-lobed Obi exist? How many types of Obi exist? This is a good one. So the types of Obi, as I mentioned earlier, there's a 2-lobed type, which is called Goro. And that type is not, although I use it for the photographs because it photographs very nicely, that's not the type that is, for some of the photographs, that's not the type that's used for divination, because even as we open the Obi, again, going back to this male and female piece, you see this one is 4 lobes. Every 4-lobed Obi, 2 of the pieces will be considered male and 2 of the pieces will be female, depending on the shape that they have. And so only 4-lobed or above can be used for the type of divination that we're talking about. So there are 5-lobed obi. Those, there is an extra piece that has a double feminine terminus or ending when you look at it. And so that piece is called the Ofa, the power piece. And we offer that to the divinity before throwing. And so again, this talks to our epistemology as well, because when you look at what each type of obi is used for, you further go into how the knowledge is produced around it. So for example, there's a fabled obi that I've never seen, that most people have never seen, that has no segments. It's a solid orb, which, you know, it'd be like opening an orange and it not being able to pull apart. You'd be looking at it like, what is this, right? So there's an obi like that, and that obi is used for fertility issues, right? It can, and it's said that it can either be used to open the womb or to close it, depending, right? So this idea of it not being able to open, that's another orientation. So thank you for asking that. So again, part of my concern in looking at all of this is literally just looking at each thing and how going from describing each type. So in the book, I really describe obi, how it's used. There hasn't been a full, robust description like that. And also all of these other points. I see Esmeralda has had her hand up for a while. I would love to hear one voice before we go, if she's brave enough to say her question out loud. Let's see. Esmeralda, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. So I know you were wanting to stray away from like the gender binary and differences, but actually I wanted to ask, earlier you were talking about women being the centers of knowledge, and you kind of compared us to a computer. So would you say that the persecution of women who have knowledge, whether of body, mind, nature, really all of these, be like a pushback against the patriarchal Judeo-Christian powers, against the feminine divine? From what you've been talking about, you really like informed us about how there is really no proscribed like a gender role for the way that you implement this. But I thought it was interesting that for Judeo-Christians, the downfall of man was when women gained forbidden knowledge.
Oh, you know I'm gonna talk about that, because thank you so much, first of all, for that question. I'm so excited. The apple, right? Going back to plants and this connection with plants, right? And it's an apple, it's a plant that gives a woman hidden knowledge. And then again, yeah, as you said, according to Judeo-Christian theology, that was the downfall of humanity. Whereas in many other knowledge systems, including Ifa Orisha, women were specifically selected by the divine to receive this knowledge because of their temperament, because of the other gifts that the divine was thought to have given them. And so absolutely, this teaching explodes much of what we've been taught as, you know, as women, as, you know, people about half of the population, right? And so thank you for that question. It is absolutely a concern of mine to challenge some of these viewpoints, and furthermore, to challenge some of the theoretical knowledge around them, which have around religion and its thoughts about women more broadly, and their knowledge, which have largely been developed based on Judeo-Christian theology, right? So in order for us to have a more robust picture, we have to use more different types of theology, more different types of knowledge systems to draw our theories and basis from. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Oh, you know, I just, I don't know if we have like 5 more minutes. I just realized that there was actually like a little question section.
I think, yeah, for the Q&A, I think we'll probably save that and maybe have you do that later in respect for people's time. I think
Okay.
we'll wrap it up now. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm sorry, I just noticed the comments, but what I'm doing is copying them, and maybe we can send out, I'm happy to type up some responses and send them out later.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your presentation today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate you. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.